Okay, good morning. I'm Susan Katzman and welcome to Coffee Talk. I'm half of the duo that gets to host this every month. My other half, and certainly the better half, is Lisa Gubernick, who is our National Council of Jewish Women Vice President of Membership, and I'm a past president. And we have been, as many of you on the screen know, we've been doing Coffee Talk. July was 2 years. We started Coffee Talk with COVID. It was Lisa's idea to do something that would connect members, that we would address some light and easy kinds of topics. We would laugh a lot and we would learn a lot, but in a fun and informal way. And so we continue this morning with a little bit more formal topic, but still we'll have fun while we're at it. I am really pleased to introduce my brother, my youngest brother, Howard, who lives in Atlanta. And he grew up in Omaha, Nebraska with me and our other brothers, and got a degree in urban planning from University of Pennsylvania. And for probably 25 plus years, owned a high-end construction company doing rehab and redesign work all over Atlanta. Early on, he moved into the energy and the green design work. And for 9 years, served as a director of the Building Performance Institute, which was a standards and accreditation body for the home performance contracting industry. Now he still does that. He does consulting with builders, with developers, and with homeowners. He does energy audits, is on the preferred list in Atlanta, which doesn't surprise any of us in the family. And I think is really sought out because he is very honest, he is very clear, he is very concise, and very level-headed and personable in his approach in dealing with people. And so what we did today was to take your questions, and he's put a PowerPoint together, and we're going to explore all those. And then we've already been told that others have other questions. So we'll handle that part a little bit later. All of this today got started because I was in Atlanta for his son's wedding, and I noticed that the dishwasher in his house was very silent. You never knew it was on. And it made me think about my dishwasher, and that when I take the dishes out, sometimes I think they still look dirty. And my question to him was, why do my dishes sometimes come out dirty, and what can I do about that? And he said to me, have you cleaned the filter? Of course, my response was, I didn't know there was a filter. So I got to thinking, coming back, and I called Lisa and I said, you know, this might be an interesting program. So my brother and his wife, Katie, are due to leave tomorrow for New Zealand. So we pulled him in when he's got a lot going on, but we are excited for you to have answers to some of your questions and give you a chance to ask some more. And I'm happy to have you meet my brother, Howard. So, Howard Katzman, I have one question that came up before we get to your PowerPoint. And that question is, if I need to change a light bulb, or forget the light bulb, if I need to do anything that involves electricity, like with a light, do I have to turn the electricity off before I do that work?
Good morning, everyone. I don't know about you, but with music like that, who needs coffee? If you're changing a light bulb, unless you're going to stick your finger in the socket, the answer is no. You don't have to turn off the electricity. But I think if you're doing anything else, Sue, that involves electrical devices and you're connecting them or disconnecting them from live wires, the smart thing to do is to turn off that breaker at the panel.
Okay,
And then there are testing devices that you can use to double check before you touch the wire. You hold this device, the contacts to the two wires you're going to be messing with, and it'll tell you if there's any current flowing through that wire. Oh,
okay.
Sue, how did you find that? Oh my God.
This is what we typically do.
Are you going to be
We
pulling up my DNA too? Is this, yeah.
Now, we always share a picture of our guest in the younger years. So, thank you,
That's way
Chrissy.
younger. That's when I still had hair.
Howard, do you want to say anything before you get started with your PowerPoint about your work in Atlanta, or anything you've learned about household work?
I will just say that there are tremendous benefits to the internet, and I am myself a benefactor of YouTube videos. They're not all correct or accurate, but you can learn a lot from them. I just fixed my dishwasher with YouTube videos from the internet. So it's probably saved having to replace the dishwasher with a $5 part. So there's some pretty amazing stuff out there.
Okay,
You're gonna show my PowerPoint, right?
yes, you ready?
Excellent. Sure. Yeah.
Let's start with the PowerPoint. And let me say to everyone, we had a lot of questions. All the way from what to do if you notice crumbling grout in your bathroom, to is it cost effective to add insulation to the walls of a 60-year-old house, to what should I consider when I replace my furnace, to what are 2 or 3 magic products to keep in your house, etc. So as Howard put a PowerPoint together responding to some of those questions, and so he will share kind of what the question was that he was responding to. And then a little later on, we will take questions from the chat, or you'll put your hand up and Lisa and I will call on you. And as always, we thank Chrissy from our NCJW staff for her help. Okay, Mr. Katzman, take it away.
Take it away. Okay. Take us to the next slide, please. Okay, I started with this slide because even though there were no questions about solar, I know that people are thinking about solar. And when I have conversations with other people about solar, and they have been approached or are approaching solar companies, they're typically only talking about putting solar on the house. And so the companies that are selling solar installations aren't looking at the house, they're just looking at how to sell you solar. And but there really are some things you should think about before you install solar, because you're only replacing the energy source, and other issues that you may have in your home don't go away just because you're getting your electricity from a different place, such as, you know, your home may not be comfortable, the temperatures may be uneven, you still may have high utility usage, and which means that you can't replace as much of your purchased electricity with photovoltaic because you're limited by how much photovoltaic you can put on your roof. So the goal is to replace as much of your purchased electricity as possible. So your house still may be very inefficient, and you may have issues even with indoor air quality. The last point on there, okay, well, you do have solar on an NCJW building. That's great. The other thing to keep in mind is what I call the energy conservation multiplier effect, and that is your electricity comes to you. It's easy. You don't have to think about it. You just flip a switch, or your refrigerator kicks on and off. You don't think about it. It's just there, right? As long as you're paying your bill, you're getting that electricity every month. But in Missouri, a significant percentage is coming from, most of it's coming from fossil fuel plants, right? So that means you're burning coal or natural gas in power plants, and that process of burning the coal or the gas, turning turbines, moving the electricity through the wires all the way to your house, that whole process is only about a third efficient, meaning that about 2/3 of the energy that's produced from actually burning that coal or burning that gas actually ends up as electricity at your house. So the other way to look at it, if you flip that, is that for every unit of electricity you don't consume in your home, you're saving 3 units back at the power plant that doesn't have to be burned. And that burning generates carbon in the atmosphere. So conservation can be a really powerful thing. Next slide. Can you flip us to the next one? Can you flip to the next slide? Thank you. Thank you. I did have a question about, let's see, this question had to do with, is it cost effective to add insulation to walls of a 60-year-old house? So again, you use your electricity, you don't really think about it, and then you get a bill, right? You get a bill once a month. Maybe you look at it, maybe it's paid automatically, whatever, but it just tells you how many kilowatts you purchased, but it doesn't tell you how much was used for your lights and how much was used for your refrigerator, right? You just get a bill. Well, this is kind of there's great variation from home to home, but roughly just under half of your energy bill on an annual basis is used for heating and cooling and so forth. And you can see that, lighting and refrigeration takes up maybe total of maybe 20% and so forth. Again, these vary with house to house, but this gives you a general idea of where your consumption's going. Can you flip to the next slide, please? And you can see here that the heating and cooling on the last slide was the biggest percentage. And if you look, what's making up most of the heating and cooling is not your walls. Ceiling and walls are combined on the left, but on the right, you see that walls and cooling are like, less than 15%. It's not a big percentage. So from a cost-effective standpoint, to tear off the plaster or drywall in your home and put insulation in would not be very cost-effective. It could be somewhat effective, but what really matters, what are the big numbers at the top of each list on heating and cooling, is infiltration. That's air leakage in and out of your home. So this is a great way to look at what are cost-effective things to do. And like I said, you could get some benefit from insulating your walls, but what would the cost be? I would say that if you're doing some sort of a remodeling project where you're opening up your walls as part of it, you're doing a kitchen, you're doing a bathroom, at that point, yes, when you have those walls open, air seal the walls because you see infiltration at the top, and then insulate them, most definitely. Next slide, please.
Howard, I don't mean to interject. Do you want to say a word about the kind of work you do in going to people's homes and testing for the air leaks? And because I had that done in my house, not by you, because I would have, but we don't live in the same city, and it was an eye opener how much air we were losing, and then we had it sealed up.
Yeah, and yeah, at some point I would plan to get to that, Larry. I appreciate you bringing it up now. One of the
Sorry.
weakness. No, that's good. One of the weaknesses in the construction industry, in general, is that people will say, "Oh, I fixed this or I fixed that." There's a real lack of testing and verification, and if you don't test, you really don't know. One of the things that I do, as Larry alluded to, is if people call me out to their house because they're concerned about energy bills or comfort or air quality, I will frequently actually do testing to measure how leaky the house is. And while the test is running, and the test is basically a big fan, it's about this wide, you can't really see it in the screen, but I put it in somebody's door in a panel. And so we're pulling air out of, it's a big fan that's pulling air out of the house. So it helps me get an actual measurement of air leakage, which is good because if you're going to get your house fixed and you're going to pay someone to air seal the house, you want to know by doing a test after how much improvement did I get, right? I mean, otherwise, how would you know? But while the test is running, I can show customers where their air leaks are in the house. And like Larry said, it can often be an eye opener. Next slide, please. Can you advance? Okay. I got a question. Should, if you're not using a fireplace and you don't want to repair it, can you close it up? Well, this is really a good idea to do because I have that top photo in there because you see something's burning, and where's the smoke going? It's going straight up. And that's because the smoke, which is warmer than the air around it, is lighter, and it's going up the chimney, right? It's going up the flue. So when it's cold outside, your chimney is pulling air up it, even if there's not a fire going. It was about 35 degrees today in Atlanta when I woke up. If I had my chimney damper, and I have an airtight damper on my chimney, if I had gone onto the roof and stuck my hand over the damper, over the chimney flue, I would have felt a breeze. Wow. Air's literally getting pulled out of your house, and that's what you want for a chimney, right? You want it to pull the smoke out of your house, not leave it in your house. The older style metal dampers, like some of you may have in your homes, those really aren't that airtight. So if you're not going to use your fireplace anymore, yes, put a solid cap on, like in the lower photo, and air seal it in. Make sure it's completely caulked and sealed when it's installed. And the other thing is, turn off the gas line to the fireplace so you never burn anything in that fireplace again. Because you always want to have exhaust gases being removed from the home. Vent-free fireplaces, for example, are a really bad idea. They're not safe and they could kill you. So the other thing is fireplaces don't provide that much heat, but when they're running, the amount of air going up the flue increases because of that warmer air from the fire. And so that's pulling a lot of cold air into your house to compensate. It's not, they look nice, but they're not really providing much benefit. Okay, next slide, please. I had a question about buckling floors, that this person's condo has beautiful hardwood floors, and they had some isolated buckling, and two occasions about a year apart, they had a company replace the flooring and then recommended they get dehumidifiers. Then they, and she's wondering, should she, and then they also recommended a humidifier. So dehumidifier, humidifier. Okay, which do you do? When do you do? Why do you do? So my first question is, what were the causes, or what was the cause of the buckling? The question, I don't know if this person's on the call, but I'd love to have a interaction because we don't know what the causes are. If you look in the photo, I mean, it's pretty obvious the likely culprit here was water leaking in from the door, which caused the floors to buckle. And the reason the floors buckle is if your floors are made out of wood, wood's a natural product, right? Water is what travels up the tree from the roots to support the living tissue above the ground. So water is, tree material, tree tissue is designed to move water. And when it gets wetter, it expands. And so you'll get this kind of thing happening. So we don't really know what the causes are. Do we have this person responding? I see there's some chats.
I don't know who gave that question.
I don't want to put a person on the
Hello. Hi.
Oh, hi. Is that Donna Brodsky?
Yes, this is Donna. Howard, you're so thorough, but I have AAA coming to fix my battery in my car. Let me just ask the narrow question. They told me to get a humidifier attached to my furnace in the winter. So what does that involve? Is it expensive? Instead of attaching a humidifier at cost and labor, could I just get 2 small humidifiers to use as I'm using the dehumidifier units now?
Well, my first question is, how do you know you need it? The air being too dry didn't cause your floors to buckle.
No, but they told me in the winter, I could have a dryness issue. They were looking ahead to the winter.
How long have you lived? I'm sorry.
Go on.
How
No.
long have you lived there?
About 1.5 years.
Have you had problems with the flooring other than the buckling?
No, the 2 instances of buckling, period.
In the South, we have a saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Okay, well, I'm a little proactive, however.
If they're not monitoring and measuring your humidity in the winter, how can they tell you that you need to put a water and potentially mold producing machine in your house? I mean,
okay, then the solution is when they come out for maintenance of my furnace, ask them to measure my humidity. Is that?
Well, I would first ask, well, I would ask you the question. You've lived there 1.5 years, so you've lived through a winter in your home, correct?
One winter, yes.
Was your air excessively dry?
I wouldn't know how to measure excessively.
Were you getting nosebleeds? Was there a lot of static?
I've never in my life had a nosebleed, so I'm not sure if that's an indicator.
Was there a lot of static electricity in your house? Were you waking up with sore throats or dry sinuses?
No, but there's a very good question. What should the humidity be, and how do I get it to be measured? Instead of,
well, you
what
can buy.
What do you recommend?
You can buy what's called a hygrometer online for like $20, and it'll give you the relative humidity in your home. I'd like to add, can you let me share my screen? I have a really good, can I do that?
Chrissy, did you take him off? Did you add him?
We'll make you a co-host and then you'll be able to share your screen.
Okay, good.
What I'd really like to know is when they come in for the maintenance of the furnace, what should I ask them? What questions should I ask?
Well, here's your optimum zone. I mean, you want to be ideally in the 40 to 60%. You're going to be more humid 50 to 60 in the summer because St. Louis is a humid climate, and ideally 40 to 50 in the winter. But if you got down to in the 30s, that's not unusual. And I bring this up because this tells you something about health. So the wider the red bar, the greater the increase in effect from the viruses, bacteria, whatever. I think this is a very educative. I certainly, this certainly opened my eyes when I learned this. This is called the Sterling chart. So I think you want to be in this range. I think if you can, is it Donna?
Thank you, yes,
Yeah,
thank you.
and for obvious health reasons too, right? And
Okay, agreed. So can the maintenance people tell me what my range is? I would imagine they have this tool.
maybe
The furnace people.
they might, and they're only going to tell you what it is the moment they're there. Whereas if you bought one online, you could look at it periodically. It's also possible that your thermostat tells you what it is. More and more thermostats, the newer models do give you that information.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you for responding to my question. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Sure. Yeah. So I guess I should stop sharing. Stop share. There we go. So you can put this, thank you. So this is you know, this is kind of a illustrative, I think, of what I was talking about earlier about the construction industry. They're making recommendations, but what are they basing it on? How do you know what you need in your home? It is true that homes tend to become a lot drier in the winter, for example, but her house may not have that situation. And then the question is, how do you know, in her case, in Donna's case, should she be using, they're telling her use a humidifier and use a dehumidifier. Well, should I have them on at the same time? She wondered. When should she turn on one and turn on the other? And when it comes to both, there are settings on them. You can adjust how much moisture they're taking out of the air and how much moisture they're putting into the air. Well, which do you pick? I think the Sterling chart helps give you that sense. Dehumidifiers are basically small air conditioners. So they are energy hogs. And they didn't tell her what to set it at, but to set it below 60, 55 or 60% would be a significant waste of energy. She's going to see it in her bill, and the benefits are really not that great. Plus, her air conditioner, your air conditioner, also dehumidifies. So how do you know if you need to add supplemental dehumidification? That's a question. And it just depends, right? Without being there in the house, it's hard for me to really know. But these are some of the kinds of questions I get in my business. Can you please, are there any questions on that? I'm sorry, before we move on. I think it's helpful just to kind of address the questions. I haven't had
I have a
time to-
question.
Yeah.
So I'm probably not the only one on the screen who had some flooding experiences this summer with our severe rains. So, and it's going to be forever. I mean, not forever. It's going to be a while before I can address all of the recommendations I have to leak-proof my basement. So one of them has been, if there's water leakage and we don't know when it's coming, get a dehumidifier down there. So how do you respond to that? It makes really good sense to me.
So you're saying have a dehumidifier in place so that if and when you get more water leaking in, you can remove it? Is that what you're saying?
That there's water in the air.
That
But
was the
that's not your
recommendation.
that's not your problem. Your problem is liquid water, right? Not vapor.
Yeah, well, it could be both, couldn't it?
Well, but your flooding is liquid water.
Correct.
Okay, do you have, prior to the flooding experience, did you have mold in your basement?
Thank goodness, no. But
Well, then why do you need to run a dehumidifier?
Maybe they're saying to prevent that from happening if she.
yeah,
does
like right
it.
now, until I take care of, until I'm able to break out my walls and get and do what I need to do to
Mhm.
repair the damage. It's possible there is mold building back there.
Do you smell
In
it?
the plaster. I do not, and I cross my fingers every time someone comes
Okay.
down and says, I don't smell it.
Okay, I would suggest that you as well get one of these hygrometers online and set it down there and go and monitor it. And as long as
Okay.
the humidity's below 70% or 60, let's say 65%, just to be safe, as long as the humidity is 65% or lower, you don't really need to run a dehumidifier.
Thanks.
Is your basement heated?
Yeah, it's the warmest and the coolest
Okay.
place in the house.
So chances are this time of year, the more the air's mixing with the rest of the air in your house. So chances are you don't really need a dehumidifier, because if you can keep it below 65%, why waste the electricity? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. But knowing, advice given without knowing what the conditions are may not be accurate advice. It's just, talk is cheap, but it's not always the right thing. It may be, but maybe
And
not.
Someone asked a question, if you buy the item that you're talking about to measure your air, how do you then figure out what's needed?
Well, I would go back to the Sterling chart. I mean, you want to
Okay,
keep
based on
it,
the
you want to keep it ideally between 40 and 60 in a basement that you don't live in. You can let it get up to like 65%. And in the winter, your temperatures, when it's really cold outside in St. Louis, it may be hard for you to keep your relative humidity above 40%. It may drift into the 30s. And that's still in a safer range than in the more extreme ends of that table,
Okay.
right? Up or down. Any other questions? Water's a big one. Water affects our houses.
I
We
have a
build-
question.
Sure.
It's the question that we're just talking about, but if you live in an apartment building or a
Mhm.
condo, you don't have the control of all the heating and the air conditioning. How do you then figure out what you need?
Are you saying you don't have a thermostat in your
I do
unit?
not. The building is 65 years old. And it's got central heat
Mhm.
via furnace, sort of,
Boiler.
and
Mhm.
air conditioners
As in window units?
in every unit, in every room. And this is my first winter in a house, in this apartment, so I'm trying to figure out whether it's dry.
Are you concerned that you have too much moisture, Phyllis?
No, there's not enough.
Well, again, I would let your level of personal comfort be your guide.
Okay.
I lived in a house that I purchased and renovated. It was built in 1918 in Atlanta. It was extremely leaky. And in the winter, before I fixed it, I would wake up in the morning with a sore throat. And that I didn't like that. And I figured, why is that? And then when I got into this business and started learning about the need for things like air sealing, I air sealed my attic, which is the highest priority place to start air sealing, first place you go to. And I reduced the air leakage in my house. Oh, let me say that the way I addressed that, because I didn't, I addressed it symptomatically at first. I put a humidifier on my furnace, and that helped.
Mhm.
But then I air sealed my attic, and I was able to turn off my humidifier, and I no longer needed it because I no longer had that problem, because I was reducing the air leakage in and out of the house significantly enough. So I responded to my comfort issues and what was going on for me. And yes, you can use a humidifier. Now, you could use a portable humidifier if you felt your air was too dry. But if you're not experiencing issues, you may be fine. The thing you're going to find in a building that's 60 plus years old is there's a fair amount of air movement within your building. So you have air moving in cold weather. There's going to be plenty of humid air from the apartments below you moving through your unit. And so you may not really have a problem, but when it's really cold, you might.
Sinuses are much drier now, but then there's no sore throat or anything like that.
Yeah. And, we just have to keep in mind that when the air is colder outside, it's going to be drier, even if the relative humidity is really high on the number. If you look at the weather app, it might say, 80% humidity in St. Louis when it's 30 degrees, but the air just can't hold much water when it's cold. It takes warmer temperatures for the amount of actual quantity of water in the air to go up. So there really is much less water in the air at these low temperatures. And this air eventually gets into your building and in your unit, in our houses, and it's dry. And that's one of the reasons air sealing, as I was showing on earlier slides, is so important. Any other questions on this before we move ahead? Sue, I hope you don't mind. I mean, I think it's helpful to just address the questions as they come up. Lisa, if that's
Oh,
okay.
absolutely. No, absolutely. That's what we absolutely like that. And Susan is offline now.
Oh,
She was, so I'm flying solo. She had an issue, I guess, with her Wi-Fi. So she's been off for a little bit, but absolutely. If you have a question, people can just reach out or put in the chat, whichever way is perfectly fine. Do we want to move on to the next slide, Chrissy?
Yeah, I
Or
think
Howard?
so. Yeah, I got a question about what should I consider when I replace my furnace?
Good question.
So you have what might be considered a bewildering array of choices. And let's face it, replacing your furnace, replacing your air conditioning, it's not cheap. You can easily drop for the two. I don't know what prices you've been experiencing. The equipment costs are going up, labor costs are going up, but even before our recent inflation, you could easily drop, $6,000 to $20,000 on a heating and cooling system, right? So we're talking about some serious cash.
Mhm.
The first thing I would say is think about is efficiency. So in St. Louis, you live in a heating dominated climate. So you need more energy to keep your house warm than you use for cooling in the cooling season. So you're in a heating dominated climate. So I would say if you only have limited amount of money and you're trying to decide, should I put it into high efficiency heating equipment or high efficiency cooling equipment, I would go for the heating side. So in the photo on the left, many of you may have this kind of furnace. And when I say kind, you see the silver tube on top coming out of the top of the box there? That is the flue. And that tells you that this is about 80% efficient. On the right, you see the two white tubes coming out of the unit.
Mhm.
Those are plastic tubes. And that tells you that the one on the right is what's called a condensing furnace. And it's over 90% efficient. So These are natural gas furnaces. Natural gas has recently, in the last couple of years, gone up significantly in price. I don't know if you pay attention to what you pay for your gas, but it's going to keep going up. I just don't see, I think the long-term prospects for energy costs is increases, probably exceeding inflation rates. So you're going to pay more for the unit on the right, but assuming you stay in where you live, in your house, your condo or whatever, the typical life cycle for these is 15 to 20 years. So over that span of time, you're going to save more in energy costs than the difference between the one furnace or the other. So it is beneficial, and you're using significantly less natural gas, so you're putting less carbon into the atmosphere. There's another issue to think about, and that is combustion safety. So the one on the left, you'll see there's a panel on the front below the silver tube. That's the cover of the actual furnace. And you see there's openings in that furnace door.
Mhm.
That tells us that it's actually taking combustion air from inside the home, which is really not a good idea to have a piece of equipment like this in your home that's not more isolated in some way from the air we breathe. The one on the left, on the right, some of you may even have a unit like this in your house with the white plastic pipes, or you may only have one pipe. Well, one pipe is taking exhaust gases out of the home. The other pipe is bringing combustion air in from outside. So it's isolated from the home. It's a much safer way to put them in. Some other things to think about is, how do you know what size furnace to get? They come in capacities from 40 to 120,000 BTUs. How do you know which you need for your home? Does it matter if you got one that was, if it was too small, it might not produce enough heat for your house. What if you got one that was too big? Would there be any downsides to that? Well, in fact, there are. Bigger is not better. Oversizing of equipment, particularly cooling equipment, is still very common in the industry, and it's not a good thing. It doesn't make you more comfortable. Your equipment doesn't last as long. The temperatures don't tend to be as even in the home when equipment's oversized. So there's something called this manual J load calculation, which most heating and cooling contractors, at least in Georgia, don't do. It's actually the law to do it, but they don't do it. And most consumers wouldn't know to ask for it. And then the question is, are they even doing it accurately? I review them on a number of the projects that I'm involved in, and I usually find that their errors are rampant and they oversized the equipment. So it would be good to ask to make sure that you're actually getting a load calculation done. It's easy to get lost in the details of all these different options for equipment today, but the box that you see in the picture is only part of it. The system really also includes the duct system. How does the air get to your rooms, and how does the air get from your rooms back to the unit? Those would be the return side. The first one was the supply side. So if you're not getting good distribution, if you're not getting the right amount of air to every room, I don't care how good the box is in the picture, if you're still not going to have good comfort. So if a lot of times companies are focused on what I call what the industry calls box swapping, which means they just want to sell you the boxes in the photos here, but they don't even look at the distribution system. And you might not, as a consumer, know to think, oh, I want to address that as well, because I want comfort in my house, as well as I need a new box because I'm going to be freezing without it. Another is, don't forget the envelope. You know, having you need a furnace to produce heat for your home, but are there opportunities for air sealing and maybe insulating parts of your envelope of your home that aren't insulated or are under insulated? And then another thing to consider is there are all these equipment options, but I would not be looking at the equipment options as early as some of the other things on the list, but you could stay with a furnace. You could go to a heat pump. They make 2-stage furnaces, variable capacity equipment. You might need dehumidification added to your unit to make your home drier in the summer. There are a lot of concerns, and I mean, I could spend a whole session just talking about these things, so I don't want to get into the weeds here. And the last thing is filtration. You know, are you still using, you know, a 1-inch filter in your house, or do you have the thicker 4-inch pleated filters which filter out much more of the particulates? So oftentimes when you're replacing a furnace, it's a really good idea to upgrade your filtration if that's something you want to do. Do we have any questions? See, we've got a lot of chat entries, but I haven't looked at them.
Yeah, there isn't, I don't see another question.
Okay.
Except
move
for
on.
Ellen Alper, who said, can we talk about dishwashers?
Well, I know we're at 10:20. We're getting towards the end here. So this is a question, a series of questions about buying an electric vehicle.
Oh,
So the questions were, you know, EVs are supposed to be better for the environment, but you know, almost 3/4 of Missouri's electricity is generated by heavily polluting coal. How do you assess the relative benefits and costs? You know, should you get an EV now when it actually might be worse the environment than continuing to burn, you know, to own and operate a gasoline powered vehicle? And then secondly, since the vehicles are so expensive, even with the incentives you get from the government, maybe, you know, should you buy a used vehicle when you're often faced with the cost of replacing the batteries at, you know, 10 to 15 years out, which can be pretty pricey, 5-10 grand or something like that? Or would it be better to wait until EV prices come down to buy new? And then third is the concern about the batteries, and that, you know, we have the extraction and refining costs of the minerals, the metals used in the batteries like nickel, lithium, and cobalt, because there are environmental impacts from this, economic impacts, and we've got adverse human rights, which is true. You know, a lot of these are being extracted in third world countries. So how should one think about this? Probably a little bit beyond the scope on the third question, but I mean, you can, so I think when it comes to the electricity generation, you know, I'm not monitoring what's going on in Missouri. You know, when or will this even be changing in Missouri? You know, you're somewhat of an outlier that such a high percentage of your electricity is produced by coal, and that is significant. I think the sourcing of it does make sense. Georgia has a significantly lower fossil fuel source than Missouri does, but still we've opted to purchase our electricity through another provider, which then replaces onto the grid the amount of kilowatts we consume each month with renewably sourced electricity. So it's helping to support the development of that industry, and at least our kilowatts are being replaced with renewably sourced energy. I think that's, you know, something positive to do. I use a company called Arcadia Energy, and that may be available to you. You can go to their website and see, and then you could be doing the same thing. It doesn't really cost you any more per month, and they'll replace half of your renewably sourced at no charge. And then if you pay them a little premium per kilowatt, they'll replace 100%, which is what we're doing. So that would be one way to address that, I think. Not a perfect answer, but certainly an approach. As far as a new or used vehicle, I think it's kind of an individual decision because, I drive an older vehicle that is a gas guzzler. I bought it because for what I do, I needed a vehicle that I could put all my testing equipment in so that I could easily get to and from jobs I do. But I only drive it like 3,000 or 4,000 miles a year. So it's sitting way more than it's ever being driven. And I could have bought a new, more efficient vehicle to do what I need, but then I'm just encouraging the production of new products and potentially putting my used vehicle in the waste stream. So in one sense, it's more sustainable, I think, to keep using the vehicle you're using if it's not being used very much, which is certainly the case for me. If you choose to buy the used electric vehicle, you're kind of doing the same thing. I think we're beginning to get to the point where there will be an industry for recycling of the battery components. I know there's a plant under construction for that in Atlanta. It was just in Georgia. It was just announced in the last few months. So, that is coming. I think, I don't think it's really legal to be disposing of these batteries at this point. So hopefully the recycling stream is going to be, established for that.
Howard, not to cut you off, I don't want to, but we're at 9:26. And I know you have so many other questions that people had submitted.
Let's move on.
What did you say?
Let's move on. Yeah.
Well, and maybe we'll take one more question. I want to ask an important question that Susan and I ask every special guest, and has nothing to do with this, but it's a personal question for you, which is, we always ask our special guest, what is it that you are most proud of that you've done or to make a difference in the world? I mean, obviously you're helping us today, but is there something that you are most proud of in your life?
I guess I would say helping people who really have, it's kind of two-pronged. One is helping people who have health issues, their homes are making them sick and they don't know why, and being able to uncover what the issues are and help them get to better health. I think the other is bringing these ideas to affordable housing. And I haven't done much of this, but towards the end of my career, there's a good bit more with focus on affordable housing. So bringing this kind of higher performance approach to construction to affordable houses really makes a difference for people with limited incomes, because if they can save that extra $40, $50, $60 a month even, that makes a big difference in their budgets. Plus they're living in homes that are healthier to live in. It's valuable.
Absolutely. I agree. Well, maybe we'll schedule another. I know, like I said, there's so many other questions that we were going to cover that people had submitted. So maybe we'll schedule another coffee talk if you have time. I know you're busy and you're running to New Zealand, but I want to really quickly, thank you so much, Howard. We appreciate it.
Sure.
And before I do the raffle, to thank you, we are going to name you as a sponsor of a child for our back to school program. I'm not sure if you're familiar. I'm sure Susan has talked about it, but it's held in July, and it gives more than 2,000 kids everything they need to get ready to go back to school. So we thank you for your time.
Sure.
And thank you, Chrissy, and everyone that was on here. So here's this is like ginormous. I don't know if you can, am I on the screen?
Yes.
I am. Okay, hold on. I think it's because okay. Look at how this is big, and we're going to give this away. It's a pumpkin pie for Thanksgiving. I will deliver it, assuming I don't pick anyone that's out of town. So, okay, I am picking, it's number 8, and that is Marcy Fine. But I don't know if Marcy Fine is on here. She's not on here. Okay, we do not give to people that are not on here. Okay, Susan Keys. Is Susan on here? No, okay, I'm gonna keep moving so that I don't. Is Rachel Katzman on here? No, gosh. Okay. I have Gail Eisenkramer. Is Gail on here? Oh, hi, Gail. Okay, we have a winner. Gail, you are getting that ginormous pumpkin pie. So thank you everyone for coming on here. We hope you have a fantastic Thanksgiving. Howard, thank you again.
Sure.
Have a safe trip. We appreciate it.
Sure, and if you can, if I can capture these questions, I might be able to respond to some of these.
That might be a
Fairly easy.
good idea. We can talk. Maybe there's an email as a thank you to everyone that registered. We can maybe answer the questions that were submitted.
Yeah, I could probably answer these fairly quickly just this morning. So if you want.
Oh, perfect. We'll talk offline.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone, for being here.
Thank you.